You are now watching a clip from the Inspired by show. You can watch the full episode on our YouTube channel or listen on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. So make sure to head over there, leave us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed it, and follow the show.
That's why I think it works so well, because everyone I've met, and obviously I'm in the events industry, and Expo Empires was one of the last events that I actually came across, not because I didn't know it was there, but just been the dates never lined up. Sure. And so when I got there, and I obviously knew you by then already, I was like, now I see what everyone says, because they do say Expo Empires is the event, like the quality is amazing. For you, when you obviously took the leap, you said it's not a big leap, but you took the leap. In my opinion, I'm still like, wow, when you first got your first big speaker and the commitment and so on. It must have been nice having them focusing on that detail so you could focus on doing what you do great, which is obviously sourcing these incredible guests. Tell me about what was going through your mind when you first put your hand in your pocket, which was not a small amount of money to invest. What was going through your mind and how did you do it to get your first big speaker?
Yeah, I think the first thing is actually when you're... the first piece is to have the self-awareness as to what your genius is or what your primary skill set is. So I know that my genius is not actually attention to detail. Even though I walk into a room and the first thing I'll notice is a thing that's not quite right. That said, because my genius is setting the vision for the company, and as far as the event goes, like visualising this event and going, like, who do I want to speak? What do I want the experience to be like at a high level? I think it's then really important, if that's who you are, to then surround yourself with people that know how to execute the detail. If you're a detailed executor, then you need to surround yourself with people who can do the other bit. So I think first of all, it's having the self-awareness. I will now actually answer the question, which is like, how did I handle the decision to go for it with Expert Empires? I talk about this a lot when I teach people how to manage cash flow in their businesses, because at the time, the costs of running that first Expert Empires event were around about £200,000. And at the time, when I was making the decision, I only had in the current account about 20 odd thousand. So there was a big gap. But I knew it was, I think whenever you're making a decision, you should probably tap into equal parts logic and emotion. And the logical part of my brain had a spreadsheet with here are the costs and worst case scenario, here are the revenue numbers. Like, if we only sold this many tickets, if I only managed to get this much in sponsorships, if I only managed to make this many sales at the event, like worst case scenario, I'm going, it's still going to make money. It's still going to be profitable. So logically, I went, I know it makes sense. And emotionally, I really wanted to do it. I felt that it was what the UK events industry needed at the time. And also, I wanted to do it. I felt compelled to. So there was logic and emotion. And then all I needed to do was go, right, if I know the numbers stack up, it feels the right thing to do, how do I make this work? And so, then it was just a simple exercise of playing the cash flow game and going, right, okay, how can I fund this? And I explored loads of different avenues, which you've heard me talk about at Mastermind or at our events. So, I found ways to fund the 200,000, and there were various ways I did that. I actually, in the end, didn't borrow any money to do it. It was just playing the cash flow game, as I like to call it, that meant that it was viable. And best thing we ever did from the business point of view, rapidly increased. Expert Empires didn't exist before that event. That brand was born with that event. Launched a new brand, had a big impact on my, personal brand, I guess. Attracted a lot of new clients to us, made a big noise about, the fact that we were doing it. I often tell the story, before the event even happened, I went over to a conference in America in San Diego called Traffic and Conversion Summit, which is a great event. Who I now know the guys that run it quite well, Ryan Dice, Roland Fraser, Richard Lindner, great guys. They get anywhere between 5,000 and 6,000 people to that event a year. Amazing event. And I remember going to that event. I'd been to it for 3, 4, 5 years previous. And I remember I went to that event and all of a sudden things had changed. I was getting people coming up to me going, oh, you're the guy that's bringing GaryVee to the UK. I'm like, oh yeah, I am. And they're like, we've got a party tonight on this yacht with all the TNC speakers. Do you want to come? I'm like, yeah. So, but like that never happened before. So, those are the things that I go, that wasn't on my spreadsheet. I wasn't equating, I'll invest £200,000 in this event to get this return. I wasn't equating the connections that I'd make as a result. And, pretty much every big name US speaker we've had since has come as a result of some of the connections I made at that event as a result of getting Gary to the first one. And, once you've had one big name, now all of a sudden other people take notice. Yeah. When I remember I approached Grant Cardone, and obviously he's like never heard of me. He's going, well, who the hell is this guy? And I'm going, well, this event, Expert Empires, last year we had Gary Vaynerchuk, this year I want you. And he's like, straight away, he knows what Gary's fee is. He knows that I'm not just messing around and that I can back this up because we've done an event with Gary. So hence we got Grant. That was the first time we'd ever done an event in the UK. That was actually at the time like the biggest event we'd ever run. So like I think making the decision was partly logic, partly emotion. But I think what's always interesting is when you make these big plays, there's so many other things, benefits that you never even imagined when you made the decision that come as a result.
Why Gary?
I was fanboying Gary for years.
Really?
Yeah. I was watching, funnily enough, a friend of mine, I haven't seen him for years, but a great guy called James Lavers, really, really good at teaching people how to speak on camera. That's his genius. And, he spoke at some of my events back in the day. And he was like getting into more and more kind of video marketing. And he was like, look, I think you should do more video marketing. You should, like use video more in your marketing and have a YouTube show and all that. And he went, your style is a bit like a GaryVee. And I was like, who the hell's GaryVee? And he's like, oh, you should check him out. He's got this thing called Wine Library. And I'm like, at the time, I have no interest in wine. I've developed a bit of an interest in wine now, as I've got a bit older, but yeah, I was like, I've got no interest in wine. He was like, I know, but watch the guy's show called Wine Library TV, because he went, how he does it, his style, his energy, how he went, I think you're quite similar. So I started watching Wine Library TV, and again, like, I wasn't interested in wine, but I started watching this show religiously. And then he created the Ask Gary V show, which was more about business, which was right up my street. So I started watching that obsessively, reading his books, became a bit of a fanboy. And then when I came up for the concept for Expert Empires, I was like, who do I want to get? He was my number one. I was like, I want to get Gary V to come and speak. Wow. Yeah. And I think he'd done a couple of talks in the UK before, but they weren't like widely marketed and publicised. And they were smaller events. So even though it wasn't the first time he'd done anything in the UK, I think to a lot of people it felt like it. So that was a good play.
And you knew you'd met him before
Gary.
he came, Gary Vee.
Yeah, I went to see him when he spoke. He was launching one of his books. I forget which one it was. And they had like a book launch event in London, so I went to that event. Right, okay. It's a long story which I won't bore you with. Yeah. I tell it at the events. Yeah. But I went to the book launch, won by pure fluke, our one-to-one with Gary Vee, and then in that one-to-one we had a conversation which started the process of him then coming and speaking at Expert Empires.
Wow, it's so inspiring, Nick, because I think so many people are sat here going, Nick James has had some of the best celebrities around the world, and you've literally sat like this distance from them and asked them some incredible questions, and now to hear the story of how it all started, I think inspires a lot of people. Of the people that you've interviewed, you've spoken to, who would you say has inspired you the most?
You can't ask me that.
I can.
Yeah, you just
whether you answer or not is your choice.
No, you know what? Like, I think, by the way, something that people should hear as well is, yes, we've had some amazing speakers, big celebs, stuff like that. Most of the time I've just asked. I didn't have any in to Grant Cardone at all. Now, a lot of the speakers more recently, now I've built my brand and I've built more connections, I can pretty much get to anybody with one connection. But do you know how I got Grant Cardone? No. I went on his website, phoned his office. I went, hello. Who do I speak to about booking Grant to speak at one of my events? And they went, oh, we need to put you through to so and so. They put me through. I was like, hey, I want Grant to come and speak at one of my events. They went, okay. Like, I don't think that's a normal call or inquiry they get. Like, you know, normally there's probably an agency that deals with it or whatever. And I ended up getting through eventually to speak to his number 2. And I was like, I'm in the UK. I did this event with GaryVee. I want to do it bigger and better this year. I want Grant to be the headliner. We looked at the dates. He could make it. I went, what's the fee? They told me. I shit a brick. And then I went, you know what? Like, I think it's going to be worth it. Because again, I don't think he'd done anything in the UK before that, so it was pretty huge. So yeah, I just phoned. I literally just went on his website and went, oh, there's a phone number. I'll just phone it and see what happens. Sometimes you just got to ask.